early work at the Jung Institute, you've described in Boundaries of the Soul how for your final examination you were asked to describe the process of individuation, which is the goal of Jungian therapy, as if you were talking to a street sweeper while you were waiting for a bus. I wonder if you could repeat that definition for us.
Yes, and that was a shocker of a question, I might add, because I had studied all of the parallels of the individuation process from the alchemist down to the present day. So when this question came to me to describe it, this process while you're waiting for the bus and you're talking to a street sweeper, I looked out at the Lake of Zurich and I thought, well, it's something like being in a sailing boat on the lake and utilizing the wind, understanding that the wind is something that you don't make and you can't control, but you need to understand how to live your life in the same way that you understand how you would sail a boat, taking the power of the wind and going with it and allowing your own knowledge of it and your understanding of it to help you go in the direction that you need to be headed. And so in Jungian analysis, you learn how to deal with your own power, or the power that comes through you, rather, and live your life in such a way that it's harmonious with that power which is above and beyond and all around.
It's as if the forces within our psyche are like the winds that might blow us about, and as we learn how to work with the winds, we can direct ourselves through our lives.
And we don't change them. We don't, in Jungian analysis, try to make somebody different from who they are. But what we try to do is to guide people to recognize themselves and discover themselves and find out what was always there but hasn't been recognized or lived out.
Mm-hmm. One of the tendencies that you've pointed out in modern culture is for people to sacrifice their individuality for the sake of security so that they can have a comfortable home, and the price that they often pay is, as I suppose, they lose their soul in a way. And it's almost as if Jungian psychology is a rediscovery of the soul.
Yes, it is very much like that in a certain way. There's an old story about, I think it's an old Jewish legend actually, about God calling an angel to bring a soul down to the mother who was about to give birth to a child. And this soul, during the pregnancy, is taken on various trips to find out what his or her life will be like. But at the moment of birth, the angel hits the infant on the head, and with that, at that moment, the child forgets all that it knows about the soul and all its adventures, and then has to spend his whole life recovering bits and pieces and putting together that essence of who he really is. I think it's a beautiful story because it suggests that we are born not as a tabula rasa, not as a blank a table with society and the environment writing experience upon it and shaping the individual, but that we come with something very definite, definite tendencies, and that certainly what happens to us influences what we are going to become, but it never really changes it totally.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a striking contrast, really, I think, between Freudian psychology in this regard and Jungian psychology. One senses that the great influence that the Freudians had in our society was to look at the religious impulses and the religious traditions and sort of reduce them down to sexual instincts and the expression of those. And Jung almost took the opposite point of view. He looked at sexuality and saw it as a symbol of our spiritual strivings.
Yes, he certainly did. In fact, he's often quoted as saying that when somebody comes to him with a sexual problem, he's quite sure that at base it's spiritual, and when they come with a spiritual problem, he has a pretty good idea that it may be based in sexuality. But Jung saw the totality of the person, a kind of wholeness in which you look at many, many levels of experience. And when you look at, for example, look at sexuality, you're not only looking at the relationship between a man and a woman, but you're also looking at what each person brings of their concepts from their parents, of the relationship with parents to each other, and more than that, the parental belief system, which has to do with the guiding principles that were prevalent in the household, and that gets into spiritual issues as well. I mean, was sexuality an expression of the divine creative spirit, or was it a kind of falling into the material and the sensual and leaving the creativity of the spirit? Mm-hmm. And so that the two are not in any way separated.
You've described a dream that Jung himself had, I think when he was a young child, that sort of conditioned his whole outlook in this area. I wonder if we could go into that a bit.
Yes, that was a famous dream when he was about 3 or 4 years old, and he dreamed that he was going down into an underground chamber, and he went down and down and down, and he came to a huge room, and at the far end of the room there was a golden throne, and on the throne was an object that was nothing less than a golden phallus. And he looked at it wonderstruck because it was radiant, and he felt that he had found something miraculous and amazing.
It was about the size of a tree, as I recall.
Something like that, yes.
Uh-huh.
And then he heard his mother calling, "That's the man-eater." And he shuddered and he was frightened, and he was, had this, so many of us have, this tremendous spiritual attraction to sexuality and the fear and of the awesome power of it. And it's never simple. Mm-hmm. It's always the tension of the opposites. Jung had much to say about the tension of the opposites. He said one of the things that he's quoted as saying is that whenever something you find out is true, the opposite is equally true.